he's at a certain level in his organization that he could make a decision on the spot and pay me on the spot for my services. And so I started to target people like him, right? Now, normally, for people who are starting out, they will typically target people who are either mid-level managers, PR managers, or comms managers. And I remember who can make decisions because they would then need to essentially advocate for me in front of their bosses. So it was in my best interest to go straight for the bosses. Again, thank God for LinkedIn because LinkedIn shows you designations. So nobody knew me. There wasn't any antecedent as such. There wasn't any agency experience. There was no big name in terms of a brand behind me. So how was I going to get people to pay for anything? And there was no money in my account.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was a trying moment for me. It was a trying moment, but I didn't leave it. I didn't leave it.
Tolulope, I have like a million and one questions just bubbling in my because of all the fantastic things that you have shared, right? So I'm just trying to
Mhm.
kind of put my mind under control to say, okay, Kunle, relax. Let's take it one step at a time. You have Tolulope here now.
Please,
Let's take it one at
please.
a time. Right. But
Mhm.
let me just, if I think just to remain on this particular train, I will go back to some of the other questions later. How then did you get to that point where you are able to transition from supporting or providing consulting service for just one single outfit or business, right, in terms of that
Mhm.
school, to the point where you're now dealing with well established and well founded organization? I saw Mandelas, I saw all sort of organizations on your profile. How did you
Yeah.
navigate that? I mean, that's just 7 years ago. Now we know that the business started 2006, quite all right. 2018 was a
Mhm.
defining moment, right? But even at that,
Correct.
you had just one client, right? And you're still like,
Mhm.
should we go back to our 9 to 5 or should we scale
Mhm.
this, right? You still have those
Mhm.
fears, right? How then that 7 years ago you look back and you're like, this is it, right? Because now it looks
Yeah.
like everything is set. What happened?
Mm. Well, so you know how when somebody is hungry, oh, there's a certain level of inspiration. Honestly, there's a certain
Hmm.
level of inspiration that you can only access when you are hungry,
Hmm.
and that's not a joke. Honestly,
Now that
when you are
hunger,
hungry and you don't have backup, because you
I'm
know
gonna say
that.
so. That hunger, should we call it?
Mhm.
Is it like normal food
No, no,
hunger
no, no.
or
This one,
hunger for something?
food, sir. No, 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 no. No, no, no. You know, it is when you are fed physically that you can start to look at the other definitions of hunger. Mm-mm. I'm talking
Yeah,
about real life. If I don't have
proper
money, I'm
proper
not going to
hunger,
eat. Proper
kind of.
hunger, physical hunger,
Yeah,
right?
I see.
Hunger that does not have backup. There's nobody you are going
Hmm.
to ask to say, I'm going to get money from this person, right?
Hmm.
It's interesting. I come from a family of all girls. I'm the third of four. My baby is
Hmm.
quite a distance from me. So you know
Yeah.
how for a while online you'll say, "Oh, last bonds, you have elder people, elder siblings that you can go and ask for money."
Hmm.
My family was not trained like that. Everybody for yourself, God for us all, right? And so I'm not the kind of person who had this background of there was somebody you could ask, and my siblings were doing well, right? But in my family, once you get married, it's you and your God. All right. Again, it was also that I'm not used to not having my own money. So the fact that I was looking at a blank bank account was disastrous for me. And the money was not going to come from anywhere. Like I said, there's a level of inspiration, there's a level of divinity that you access when you are desperate and you are hungry. I got into that frame in Q1 2019, right? God, what am I going to do? Where will I go? And guess what? At the time when I resigned from my job, my mom started crying around. Tolu Taloniko resign. Ah, you want to rely on a man exclusively, as in, so is your husband that you'll not be waiting for to give you money for my. Anyway, it was later that I heard that because she didn't say that to me. She was just concerned and she was telling my baby sister about it. She wouldn't have said that because I've done it, I've done it. There's nothing you're going to do about it. Um, but at that time, it was something just had to give, right? And so that's why I say that LinkedIn is the headquarters of my business. So now I've been on LinkedIn, like I said, since 2010, and when it was just gaining grounds in Nigeria. Now, this was me that back to my life plan. I thought I needed to know certain kinds of people to be able to make a success of this business. And at the time when I then decided to do the business full time, I had absolutely nobody. I didn't even know any name in the industry, right? Because I wasn't necessarily in the industry when I was going to start Mosron full time. I was on the client side, and on the client side of work, it wasn't necessarily an industry conversation. You were more involved in the industry of your employer, right? So I didn't know anybody in PR. I didn't even know what questions to ask. But then, thank God for LinkedIn. You know, I'm very, very passionate about the beauty of the internet, how the internet can transform, has transformed people's lives, including mine. Because without the internet, without LinkedIn, obviously my business wouldn't be here today. I would likely still be, because there was a time in my life when I had just finished service and I worked, for those who are familiar with Lagos. I worked from, I don't know the names now, but I think it's Oba Akran to this Christ Embassy area with my CVs. So this time it wasn't internet, and submission of CVs was not in at the time. But I walked. There it wasn't that I was jumping buses. Oh, I was checking on the road. Anywhere I see security that showed their face, Oga Bega, they find work. Right? So that was what I was coming from. And so now having the internet where there was an opportunity for me to just express myself, but not express myself as me, as Tolu, because who cares about Tolu? Who are you? Who do you know? What do you have? Nothing. However, the thing that I had that nobody could take away from me was my knowledge of communications and my expertise in it. All right. And so, what I focused on doing on LinkedIn was to write about my profession and the work I was doing, the challenges I faced in business. I wrote it there. And it's so interesting. And that's why when people ask me for mentorship, what else do you want me to say? What was there to mentor? Everything I went through professionally is on my LinkedIn. The times when clients or prospective clients turned down my proposal, when I questioned my capacity to do work, I wrote about it on LinkedIn. So if anybody sees Tolucomms now and says, "Oh, Tolucom and mentor me," no, no, no. If you're asking me for mentorship now, it's because you've not read what I've written. And if you've not read it, that means you're not ready. Do you see? Um, and so I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. And then what I then started to do, I did a so in marketing, it's called a persona, right?
Mm.
What does the client, your ideal client, what do they look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Like a profiling of some sort, right?
Thank you. Profiling. And so I took a step back. This chairman of the ambassador schools, he's a certain kind of person. He's at a certain level in his organization that he could make a decision on the spot and pay me on the spot for my services. And so I started to target people like him. Right? Now, normally, for people who are starting out, they will typically target people who are either mid-level managers, PR managers, or comms managers. And I remember, who can make decisions, because they would then need to essentially advocate for me in front of their bosses. Now, this was me that was hungry. So I didn't have a lot of time to explain, to say, Atolu, my boss is not available. Your boss is not available. Okay. So it was in my best interest to go straight for the bosses. Again, thank God for LinkedIn, because LinkedIn shows you designations. Um, yes, it was, LinkedIn was it for me. So essentially what I did, I wrote a template DM. You see, I do a lot of things by template because there's no point reinventing the wheel. I wrote a template message, a similitude of what I posted on my WhatsApp status, that got my friend to introduce me to a chairman. How is your business starting out this year? What are your plans? I can deliver this, and this for you in terms of results, because I realized very quickly that I was going to fall into this rabbit hole of using my industry jargons to people who were non-industry people, business leaders who were non-industry people that could not understand what I was saying. But if I spoke about results, not the process, they would understand it quickly. So I wrote this template DMs, and without exaggerating, I maybe sent to about 100 people. Now, 100 seems small, but only if you understand the process of getting the 100. Now, remember that I have a client profile that I was targeting. And the process of finding those guys, because you can just go on LinkedIn, and at that time you will see people say, "Oh, I'm CEO that is in 200 level, or I'm the managing director that is selling Zobo." That's not my audience, right? So it was two pronged. I was writing articles, and the content was very specific, and the optimization, the how I optimize those content, I was specifically targeting very senior executives. In fact, I would deliberately, because I'll post on LinkedIn, bring the link to my WhatsApp status, and I would deliberately mention, if you are not a senior executive, if you are not a C-suite executive, don't bother reading, because this content is not for you. I wasn't concerned about the number of likes. I wasn't interested in the number of impressions, right? I was interested in the quality of people who were reading it. And LinkedIn is beautiful. If you click on this view more, so if you are the author of a post, for example, and you want to look at insights, if you click on that insight, it tells you the top companies where your readers are where your readers are working. It tells you the countries or the space, the location. It tells you their seniority level. And so for each time I was sending that my 100 plus DMs, I would post content. 24 to 48 hours later, I would look at the insight of that post. And that was how I started to find companies that I'd never heard of before, but that were doing phenomenal work. I'm not talking about PR companies, right? And so when I find those companies, because their people were reading my content, I would find those companies, I would go to the company's LinkedIn page. From the company's LinkedIn page, I would go to their website. From their website, I would find the chief executive officer, group managing director, people at that level. I would get the name of those people on their website, come back to LinkedIn and check if those people were there. If they are there, I would then send them this DM for each of these 100, right? And like I said, I sent about this 100 plus over time, right? And oh, yeah, I got responses. Oh, well done, when we're ready, we'll reach out to you if they responded. But you see, my Jesus never fails. Because in
Yeah.
February, yes, it doesn't. It doesn't fail. It doesn't fail. You just
Yeah.
need to be consistent with it. In
Mm.
February of 2019, when I started this process, one man responded to that DM. He's the group chief executive officer of I've forgotten the group name now. So Outsource Global is a subsidiary under the group. I can't remember the group company. But he's the group chief executive officer, and he responded to that DM. And for whatever reason, he says, "Oh, he doesn't check LinkedIn normally. Oh. He just said he should check today." Ah, it's my Jesus that is pushing you, sir. I didn't say that. But he checked his LinkedIn that day, and he responded. And he said, "Oh, let's have a meeting." Now, so again, remember that I'm coming from a life plan that says the process to get clients is that you must know people one on one. This was pre COVID, right? You must know people. You must have a Rolodex. You must have their phone number. I didn't know anybody. This man responded. And how I got his DM, his name, was through this process of somebody from your company read it. I go and check your company. Then I go to your website, and then I find your name, and then I send you a DM. He responded in February. We eventually didn't have him because he kept traveling, he was not around, whatever. We eventually had the meeting, the first meeting in April of 2019. By May of 2019, we had signed a contract. I like to talk about the number. It was 10 million naira to provide services for 3 subsidiaries. Oh, my Jesus
Ooh.
is good. My brother, remember how just 6 months before I was doing Thanksgiving for 500K. And then I got, honestly, when people say, "Oh, you need to know people," I don't believe it, right? So I've evolved a bit. right? But because the internet is there, it depends on what you're doing with the internet. And it is what you ask of the internet that it will deliver to you, right? This man, and it was interesting. So that meeting didn't just lead to what 10 million naira contract. No, no, no. There was interesting feedback because I met the man first, and then he says, "Oh, let's meet the MDs of the subsidiaries." And there were three people plus him, and so I had this board presentation. Now, this was also the time when we were taught, "Oh, if you even if you are the only person in the business, you must always say we." Right? So I went into the presentation as a we company. Of course, it was still Mozron, but I was the one designing the proposal. I was the one coming up with strategy. I was the secretary sending reminders. I was the person doing the invoice. One woman mopo, right? But I mean, let the money be complete. Let me see something in this account because hunger is in front. Okay. So I had that board meeting and I remember where I was when that man called me. Not that I got the contract. Now, there was one woman on that, the MD of Outsource Global was in that meeting. And when I went into the meeting, I went in asking questions. Also, what would you like us to do for you? What's the challenge that your company has? I asked that of all the subsidiary MDs. And when I finished, the woman was particularly quiet throughout the presentation. And when I finished the presentation, she said, Tolu, it doesn't seem like you're ready. Ready, ke? I'm ready, ma. I wasn't doing like that, but in my mind, I was like, this woman should not be the clog in the wheel
I can't
of
be
my
more
son.
ready.
Because the men were like,
Bring it on.
because I mean, I think the strategies were good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But apparently, because I had asked her a question, the expectation, and that's when I started to learn the work. Well, the
Mm,
business side of the work.
mm,
Because the expectation was if I was coming to a meeting with a client, it should not be the client's responsibility to tell me about their business. I should have done my research. I should
mm,
have known what their issues are. So the
mm,
only thing I should be coming into that meeting not knowing is what is not publicly available. If it is
mm.
publicly available, I must be ready. I must
I
go
agree.
into that meeting with
Mm,
answers to their questions, not me
mm,
asking them, so what's your problem? I must tell them I know your problem. And in fact, I can tell you the solution right now. Thank God
mm,
for her feedback that day. Because actually, so now I can tell you thank God, but at that time it looked like so after you did all this one, you got the meeting, and then I got to board level and I flopped. So I
mm,
thought Onga was still calling me. But I remember where I was. I was in the markets around my house. It's not shopping complex market or open market like we have in Lagos.
Ojiwoye.
When the GCA, yeah, so when the GCO called me, Tolu, it's not like I mean the feedback that the MD gave was correct, but I still think that you can do this thing. My gosh, like I said, I didn't know this man from Adam. I don't know what he told the other MDs, but this was the GCO. And said, Tolu, don't worry. I think you can do it, but just make sure that when you come the next time, make sure that you've read up on it. I didn't know this man from Adam, and he was just giving me the cheat code. Of course, me too, I didn't fall my own hand. When I went the next time, I was too prepared. And I came out from that engagement and I got the contract. I said, hey, God. God. So that means they are human beings. Each time I got a contract after that ambassador's experience, what I was telling myself, if one person can pay me, there are more people who can pay. I just need to find them. When this 10 million naira man paid, it was obvious. My money is there somewhere. If I can find them, they will give me. In fact, they are waiting for me to come and say I want the money. If I've not gotten the money, it's because I've not asked the right people. The money is just waiting. Tolu, what are you doing? I slept on LinkedIn. I got the contract. But then I got the contract and started executing, and that's where again I learned another lesson. So you see, I'm a very value focused person. And if I feel I'm not giving you value, I don't think you should be paying me any money. That's very short sighted, as an aside. Very short sighted. Contract is contract. If contract says you should pay, excuse me, please pay me my money. Let it be complete. Right? But again, it was the first like major there wasn't anybody like a buffer. It was strictly on a basis of merit that I got this engagement. And then of course grace. But then we started the work. It was a reputational issue at the time. 6 weeks we had done it and we had a full year's contract. Me, I got bored. They were paying our invoices, oh, but there was no work as such again. And so I sent a WhatsApp message to the MD for you to know that I was an otondo. Sorry, I was a novice
Yeah,
as a
you're
business
naive.
owner.
Yeah.
Very naive. I sent a WhatsApp message to the founder, to the MD. Now, this is the MD of the subsidiary. Madam, there's really nothing going on, right? I don't think that it's fair for you to be paying me when there's not a lot of work going. Now, this is a company that had their own in-house communications team, right? I mean, so and I'm available if there's anything. I mean, they can just call me, but let's just give space, right? So that if there's any major project coming on board, then you guys can call me back, and then um I will come on board again. So I used my hand to cut short the 10 million naira contract because there wasn't a lot of requests for work to do, even though I had an active contract. By myself, I said, I don't want the money again. Can you see that was naive? Obviously, the business owner who wants to be paying money, you say you don't want money again. Ah, Tolu, you are right. Actually, I think you are right. So of course she canceled the contract and said, sure, sure, sure. When when we have a project, we'll call you. I was happy because she said she'll call me, right? And would you see my Jesus? I'm not sure it was up because I'm very active on Twitter and on LinkedIn. It was not up to 2 weeks. Now, this woman normally, she's not anybody that would have any reputational issues online. You would even hardly find her online. That's how on Twitter. Not up to 2 weeks after used my hand to cancel the contract, this woman had a crisis because people started dragging her online. And guess who was no longer in contract to provide services to be paid? Me. Guess who the in-house people then started calling for free advisory because Shebi, you are just our consultant just now. Now you should be able to support us this period. And guess who could not send an invoice because you said since there's no work, if there's any small issue, you can call me. So of course the MD told our in-house people to call Tolu now that she'll be able to guide them. And then of course in-house people called. I couldn't say no and I couldn't send an invoice because it was more like advisory and I was not directly advising the founder. And I also didn't want to ruin the relationship so that it doesn't look like Tolu likes money too much. Because I was just like last week that we stopped paying you. Why are you saying you cannot provide this one to us again? Maybe just to tell us what we can do. I provided advice to the in-house guys. The issue was because I mean, it was just like God wanted me to learn that lesson and to show me how stupid I am, right? Because I'm saying that this is somebody that would normally there was absolutely no reason for that issue to have come up for her. She's not active online. This person just woke up that day and just mentioned her name. Anyway, that's how I provided free service. And then I started having sleepless night. Everybody come and see what happened. Do you get? So I was in a digital marketing group, and that's how I started ranting to some people who were also just starting out their business, but also young. Guys, see what I did. Am I not stupid? This thing I'm saying at that time, I'm sure I told it to not less than 10 people. But it was just me lamenting because they couldn't provide a solution. Because how I don't know. Tolu, what do you mean by you told them not to pay you again? It sounded very stupid. But me, I thought, oh, if I'm not really providing value, let's not just be collecting free money. Anyway, thankfully, I also met a couple of people. One of the people I met at that time, Nkechi Alade, she's a business solutions consultant. And I mentioned it to her, and then she told me, I met her from Twitter. We had the hangouts. And then she told me, I told you that she's also been in a similar situation and that what she learned to do was to include one clause in her contract. Regardless of the ebb and flow of services or requests, the agreed monthly sum is still payable. KO, you see that clause. First of all, it wasn't so much the client, because it wasn't like my clients were complaining. It
Mm.
was that I now had legal
Reason
justification
to
on
continue to.
my own part to continue to send invoices, whether there was an active project or not. Do you
Mm.
see? So recall
Mm.
this client that I said that in the first 6 weeks we had sort of resolved the reputational crisis they had.
Mm.
But you see that 6 weeks, if we were going to space it out in terms of normal timelines,
Normal
we
work.
would maybe have spent like 6 months, 9 months. right? So, but there was a lot of pressure, and we had to. It was something
Within
very
that
urgent.
period.
Yeah, that's short time period. So I
Mm.
didn't account for the fact that I had to bring in do a lot of work in that short period,
Over index
right?
within that very small period that ordinarily maybe 6 months of work that you had to do
Yeah,
within a very short
that had to
period.
do within that short period. And I still accepted, I mean, I was still paid the amount that I would have been paid for just one
Mm.
month, as
Mm.
opposed to a combination of all those
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, but you see that one clause that I then started to include in my contract. Oh, it was a balm in my soul, right?
Mm.
Because for me, it wasn't that my clients were complaining about paying, it was that I was not convinced that I
Comfortable.
should be charging them
Mm.
because I wasn't providing the services.
Mm.
And that's how I remembered with that conversation that was providing services. I may have provided those services in bulk, as it were, upfront.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I shouldn't be paid for the other time because
Yeah.
you never know when crisis will come. And that's
Mm.
when I learned about things like retainers. Because remember how I said I'd never worked in an agency. I don't know how agencies work. I don't know how
Mm.
retainers work. I didn't even understand the
Mm.
language that they
Mm.
use, right? And so that was another major lesson in my transition. But I'm thankful that I learned those lessons early enough. And
Mm.
that was in 2019 because by 2020 I faced another set of learning lessons.
Mm. So, look, thanks a lot for sharing that. I mean, if I want to unpack this, we'll spend the rest of today just unpacking it, right? But I think the key thing I want to pull out of this, first of all, is the fact that you are so value conscious as an entrepreneur. And yes, maybe one or two things got mismanaged, right? But you see that mindset, I'm sure, is one of the key contributor to how fast you've been able to go, right? Because you want to add value. You don't want to take something for nothing. You understand? Yes, things can be managed differently. Things can be. Do you get what I mean? But for me, I think it's a biggie, right? It's a big deal, and I think the another key thing that I also pull out of this is how intentional you were in profiling your target audience and the boldness you had. Some of us don't have that level of boldness. It's really bold, right? For you to number one, you have that clarity to say that, come, we don't have time to waste, right? Survival is at risk here, right? Who do we need to be having a conversation with? And you wrote the article. Look at where your viewership or the readership was coming from, or the engagement was coming from. Went out there to go and check their website about them. You see the CEO, and then you came back and then DM them. And yes, maybe the response rate is not like 50% or 10% or 20%, but even the 2% or the 1%,
Made up for all of them.
it's enough. It's enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's enough. Like
Absolutely.
it's one. And now I would
Absolutely.
now now let me throw you a little curveball. Now,
Mhm.
I was looking at your website and I was trying to see, okay, I went to the about us to say that just let me understand a little bit about, you know, Mosdron and all of that, and let me understand. And I couldn't find any article on you, right? Is it that you don't want
Oh.
people to be coming into your DM, like you entered into some
Well,
people's DM,
all right. I see what you mean. Well, so
like you entered
again,
into some people's
I,
DM and
I
all
get
that?
that. I get that. I get what you're saying. Oh, interestingly, I've never thought about it from that perspective. But no,
I'm
it's
just,
me that
I'm
still
just,
needs to be entering people's DMs.
I'm just kidding. Don't mind me,
There's
but
no need to look for no, but I hear you. But the reason there is no information about teams, for example, on
mm,
our website is it says niche team. And I don't believe that information about the team should be centered around the founder, right? Particularly at the company's website, right? And also because sometimes we have team members who stay with us a short while and then sometimes they also leave. And I didn't, again, so it's about managing cost. If I'm going to put up team members, that means that each time they leave, I need to update content on the website. I would have to pay people for that. Um, and my own profile also changes. I'm either winning awards, or I'm publishing a book, or I've delivered a conference. I typically update my profile maybe twice a year. right? It would mean that I need back-end website administrators to do all of that. Was just, and it's not necessarily going to bring in money.
Mm,
Everything you see on that website is designed to
mm.
say, come and
To
work for
drive
us.
click through and drive
However,
exposure.
yeah. However, if you are then looking for team members or you are looking for the founder of Muslim Communications, you literally just need to search on the internet.
They'll find
Do
you.
you see?
Mm,
Because what I've then done, because before I started Musron, I was already Tolu Olorundero.
yeah.
Even with Musron, I still have my own independent identity because I do
Mm,
more than Musron.
mm,
There's Nigerian women in PR that sort of increase visibility for our work in the industry. But I'm still an independent person. As Tolucomms, I provide consultancy services for C-suite executives. I deliver trainings outside of the framework of Muslim, right? I'm one of those people who believe that whether you're a founder or you're a very senior executive or you're the MD, there is more to you than your designation, right? So many times I don't either introduce myself as the founder of something, I introduce myself as me and the work that I do. That work can then be expanded into several other places. When I teach LinkedIn to employees, I don't encourage you to have, so if you're familiar with LinkedIn, if you don't populate this part in your designation, right? Where you tick it so that it shows in your headline, LinkedIn automatically populates that place for you. I am one of those people who will tell employees, don't allow LinkedIn show everybody that this is your designation where you work in your headline, right? Because you are more than that. You are more than that designation. What if you leave the job tomorrow? Who do you become? There has to be more to you than the work, the job that you're doing at the moment. That's something I believe in, the full expression of an individual beyond the work that they're doing, right? And just your designation cannot capture all of it.
I get that. I mean, I get it because basically I was just trying to understand, if the size of this team and the spread out of the team, and of course, this, and I was like, okay,
Well,
I'll
could
ask.
be a reason. Well, yeah. So again, like I said, because we then have quite some, most of the time when I started, I had quite junior team members because I was still the one doing the heavy lifting
Mm,
and they were very junior. Now
mm,
imagine coming to a website where we're saying that we provide services to clients in sub-Saharan Africa and
mm,
Europe, and you're seeing, apart from the founder, other team members with 1 year experience. If I
yeah,
were even the person, I would not trust
you will.
them.
It will not.
Right?
Mm,
Right.
that,
So
that,
right now, what we do till now is to let the quality of work we've done for other clients speak for us. So it's not
mm,
necessarily about the composition of the team; it's about the results of the
the
team.
delivery.
Who the
Mm,
team are is not necessarily important. Why? Because there's a template, there's a
mm,
process, a protocol that we've built. Whether you have 5 years experience or you
yeah.
have 1 year experience, you
Mm,
come into the team to deliver that protocol for the
mm,
client. So it is
mm,
the protocol that delivers the results, not
mm,
necessarily the people.
the
Because you must
people.
follow this part. It is this pattern, it is this process that has
Mm,
delivered results for us, for clients across board. We are
mm,
sector agnostic, but we don't
mm,
do consumer facing brands,
yeah.
right? It is that protocol that delivers the results, not necessarily the people, because whoever you are, once you come into the team, you must align with this protocol that we
Mm.
use to deliver services to clients. So it's not necessarily about the people.
About the person or the.
It's about, yes, it could be anybody. It could be anybody. The result is the same. The process is the same.
Is the same. Got that, and I want to double click a little into that. But before we do that, I want us to have a quick conversation around the kind of the profile of organization that you work for, right? Because initially we spoke about the profile, or you mentioned around the profile of the individual you are targeting when you are just kind
Correct.
of trying to make
Right.
that
Right.
jump,
Yeah.
right? But now it looks like you've pivoted into profiling organizations. So number one,
Organizations.
you mentioned way back that number you only serve or provide support services for organizations that have each certain number of years in terms of operations, right? I think you mentioned something like they need to be certain number of years in terms of how long they've been in business. One, and then number two, you mentioned something now around the fact that you do not work with organizations that have like consumer facing brands, something like I think
Right. Okay.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So it looks to
Hmm.
me like you have a set of filter through which
Yes.
you pass your potential clientele through to say that this is
Correct.
for me, this is not for me. Can you double click into that for our
Sure.
audience?
Okay. So remember, at some point, I mentioned that I'm mostly an introvert when I'm not at work. I'm at
Yeah.
work. You would not believe if I told you I'm an introvert, right?
Mm,
So that sort of extends into the kind of services and the kinds of brands that we provide services to,
mm-hmm.
right? We work with business to business organizations.
Hey, thanks a lot for taking the time to watch the podcast. We are super thankful for you taking that time and investing the time to learn. We hope that you find the story inspiring, and beyond that, that you've been able to articulate one or two things that you want to do differently in your own entrepreneurial journey. May I encourage you to please like, subscribe, comment, and please share the word within your own circle of influence, especially within those that you think are on the same entrepreneurial journey with you. May I also encourage you to please, beyond subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on our other social media platforms. That means a lot to us, and we can see that that helps us to track that we're making some progress and so making some impact. Thanks a lot once again for taking the time to watch, and we'll see you on the next episode.